I just want for like everybody out there and just for me as well, for you to introduce yourself. So name, grade, major in college if you are in college, and then what field you want to pursue in the future as well as a fun fact.
Yeah, so I'm Caitlin Stanton. I am currently studying at Cornell University. I'm a junior. I am pursuing a degree in electrical and computer engineering with minors in computer science and business. Fun fact would be I spent a lot watching Vines, uh, but it's gotten to a point where I can name a lot of them off like the top of my head. And so I once got 50 out of 50 on a Vine trivia quiz. And I don't know whether to be like proud of that or sad about it. But either way, it happened.
You seem to be doing a lot at Cornell, which is amazing. I was wondering how you first got into like computer science and electrical engineering and how your experience has been so far.
Yeah. So I first got into CS because I wanted to be an architect. So a long time ago, back in elementary school, I really was into buildings. I still am. I really wanted to be an architect. And so my parents put me into this like summer or not summer school program, like this high school program called ACE. So I went in there intending to be an architect, and then I found out that I really didn't want to do architecture just based on like the way that other experts had been explaining the field. So what I decided to do is go into mechanical engineering. So I was like, okay, I still want to work on buildings, but I don't necessarily want to design them. So I was into engineering. And I was like middle of high school. I was chugging along. And then my parents found this program called Girls Who Code, which at the time, this was like 2014, so super early.
Yeah.
At the time, it was a very small program. And the only reason they wanted me to like enroll in it was because they knew that I was interested in engineering, and they had heard that coding was a good skill to have for engineering, just general.
Yeah.
So then they were like, "You should join this program," and I was like, "Sure, okay." I like honestly wasn't very thrilled about it because I went to a very demanding high school, so I was like, I didn't want to spend my summer also learning. I kind of just wanted to sleep and do nothing. But I applied, I got in. So the summer before my junior year, I did Girls Who Code, and it was amazing. Like I got to work with 20 other girls that I'm still very close friends with. We got to learn fundamentals of like Python and JavaScript and HTML and CSS,
Mm-hmm.
all things I definitely wouldn't have learned in school. Like I was lucky enough to have a CS program at school, but this was an environment where I was learning alongside people who were at the exact same level as me and were going through the same like societal implications of learning tech in addition to like the actual learning of the material. So that was amazing. That's how I got my kickstart in it. And then I just started taking more classes, went hackathons, like the whole thing. Ended up at Cornell studying EC. And then for the second part of your question, how it's been so far, I'd say I'm pretty lucky. I have never really experienced like a ton of like oppression from being a woman in
Right.
STEM or discrimination or anything like that. I'm very privileged to be from a family who very much emphasizes education in the fact that like I can choose whatever I want to study as long as like I do well in it and I really want to do it. And because I went to a pretty rigorous high school, there were a lot of CS classes, so it wasn't uncommon for me to be like a woman in STEM. Like it wasn't like a huge thing. There are like some things that are like microaggressions that'll happen. So like in high school, there were other girls in my classes, but it was more of like a 1/3 to two-thirds kind of thing where the majority of them are guys. And like even though they were great to work with and definitely like very fun people who are very great partners, there was still that like divide where it's like there's way more guys than there are girls in this class. And then like even now, like in college, like I'll have times where like I'll be like TAing a class or I'll be learning material or like doing homework with friends and people will like kind of skip over me to refer to in terms of like answering a question or like getting more information or getting help. And I don't know if that's because they're like, oh, she's a girl, she doesn't know what she's doing. I think it's more of like an inherent kind of bias thing. But it hasn't escalated to the point of like anything pushing me to not be in tech. If anything, it's probably pushed me more to make sure that people are aware of those microaggressions so they don't like continue doing them. But again, like super privileged to be where I am now.
I
And
think it's awesome how your parents encouraged you because I believe like a supportive like environment around you is really crucial to like especially being a girl in STEM, to like propel you into that field. And similar to you, I didn't do Girls Who Code, but I did a program called Code with Classie. So if
Oh,
there's any girls out there who want to join like a STEM field, like those are two amazing programs that you can check out. We'll link them below. And I think it's like a great way to like build a community with women in STEM because like my first coding class ever was like a Java class, which was like a 30-2 male to female ratio. So it was like completely, I liked what I was learning, but it was like, I don't think I can do this in the long term because I don't see a lot of people like me. So yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, I'm glad that your experience so far has been mostly positive, and I hope it continues to stay that way. Current like wave that we have of like introducing more women into STEM fields, I feel like hopefully we can keep fostering that positive environment. You talk about having a lot of like computer science opportunities in your high school and throughout college. So, are there any projects that you have worked on or that you want to work on in the future that excite you?
yeah. It kind of stems back to the reason I became an EC major instead of CS. So for me, I love coding for sure. For me, I just want something that's a little bit more tangible. So like when it came to my like original CS classes, it's all like Java applications and websites and stuff like that. And that's definitely super interesting. Like it's not stuff that I want to stop learning or stop working with. But I love being able to build things. So I remember back in Girls Who Code, we like worked with robots and like
Mm-hmm.
literally just like told them to move forward and backward, like something that was very simple. But for me, being able to see my code kind of acted out on a physical device was pretty awesome. So my favorite project is something that I actually did last semester as part of this class that all ECs have to take. It's like a lab design class. We basically, over the course of the semester, built a robot that had to start at a tone, like a beep. It had to navigate a maze using depth first search. It had to like not run into walls. It had to follow a line. It had to not knock into any other robots. And then it also had to detect treasures, which were these like little shapes along the walls. So this robot was using an Arduino. So basically, Arduino is kind of like a small computer, and the really cool thing about it is that you can program it, but you can also add additional sensors, circuitry, and stuff. And at the end of the semester, we had like a actual competition to see who can solve most of the maze in like a specific amount of time. So it was nice to see how these incremental steps of using both hardware and software like combined into this fully functional robot that had I looked at it from the beginning of the semester, I would not have thought that my team and I could have finished it at all. It
Yeah.
seemed like a super daunting task. And then like for me, I found out that I'm really interested in embedded systems now because of it, because it involves building something out with hardware, but then also incorporating software and additional hardware features to it to kind of like flesh it out. So that was definitely and still is by far like my favorite project that I've ever worked on.
No, that's super awesome. Like, um, I feel like hardware and software, like the combination of the two, are like gonna be such a huge thing because robots are taking over. But I like how you talked about like that experience because it's really cool to hear about. Because I've talked to a lot of people who work in software, but to see like the combination of the two is really cool. Talked about embedded systems. Do you want to expand a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, so embedded systems is like a super vague term for basically anything that's embedded into a physical object. So
Okay.
embedded systems can be anything from like a microchip that's used to like measure body temperature or like heartbeat rate or something that's like inserted into your skin, or it can be something that's like an Internet of Things device. So like a wearable watch, like an Apple Watch, or like Google Glass or something like that. So the whole point of an embedded system is just taking like a tiny little computer and putting it into a device or putting it into something
Mhm.
to get more information from it, to give it an additional functionality,
Mhm.
just kind of like flesh out what that actual device or like the thing that you're putting the system in can do.
Oh, okay, that's super cool. Um, so how do you hope to make an impact in your field through causes that motivate you?
Yeah, I feel like because I'm dealing with hardware, there's like a lot of aspects of tech that I can touch. So for me, I think like the natural progression of hardware right now is the Internet of Things. So like making everyday life kind of simpler because you have like everything from like your microwave to like your alarm clock just digitized, put onto the cloud. You're able to like talk to it to get it to do stuff. You can control it from an app, like things like that. Like everyday life, I think I can help improve. But also for me, I'm very like passionate about how people are treated and how equal opportunities are presented. So in addition to making other people's lives easier through tech, I kind of want to make, on like another point, make people's lives easier through like societal impact. So whether that's something by improving education, like access to education, additional resources, because like I know the reason I'm in tech is because of the education I got, and everybody should have the same access to that. So whether it's something like that, or like maybe making voter suppression like less rampant, or giving people clean access to water, things like that, where it's like these are still issues that have pervaded through society and have been problems for a very long time that people have just kind of assumed will be solved by the next generation. I'm hoping that the tech that I work on will in some way impact it, whether it's by actually creating those solutions or by creating money that can help fund solutions for those issues.
That's super great. I definitely agree. Like those equal opportunity for education is like super important, and I'm glad that you care about these issues and hope to do something in the future to fix them. What would you say is a turning point in your life that helped you realize something or changed your life for the better?
I definitely say all the people in Girls Who Code for sure. Because for me, when I got into that program, I had actually been coding for a little bit. So my high school has you take a CS class before you graduate.
Wow.
So I took it and I did not like it at all. It was very segmented. Like you didn't really make a project that was interactive. It was like mathematical modeling and stuff. And I was like, this is not what I want to do. Going into Girls Who Code, I already had this like negative connotation of CS. And then being able to learn from my teachers, from the TAs, from the other girls in the program, how cool it is that like you can write a line of code and like make something appear on your screen or make like a device do something. I think that was amazing. And so that was the turning point where it was like, not only was I learning how tech can actually be used in like everyday objects and not just like in an abstract sort of sense, I was also surrounded by people who were incredibly supportive, incredibly encouraging, still talk to this day. And like, had I not had such a supportive environment to start off, like, or to add to my tech career, I don't think I would have continued to take CS classes, go to hackathons, like major in CS. I probably would have continued down the route of being a mechanical engineer, for all I know.
And that's the reasons, like, I think that this series is important just for girls to see everywhere that CS is, although a coding heavy subject, it can be used for creativity, it can be used to create stuff like the robot you were talking about earlier, or just any invention. Technology touches like every aspect of our lives. So for girls, like half our population to be involved in this change is super important. So thank you for sharing that. Um, do you think there's a conversation that also shaped where you are today, or like the best conversation, or any words of wisdom you'd like to share?
Yeah, I feel like I've learned a ton along the way. Oh my. I think for me, the biggest conversation I've had was again from Girls Who Code. There was this speaker who came in. I remember her first name was Panna, and something that sticks in my head, even from when I was taking this program, it was like 2014, so it's been in my head for like 5 years. Is the phrase "I don't know, but I can learn," and for me, that's kind of been like a tenet of my life, where I am definitely not an expert in everything. I definitely don't know even everything in ECE yet. Um, I am well versed in some subjects, have like weaknesses in others, and like I understand that. And so by saying like by accepting the fact that I don't know everything and that other people will know more than me in a certain subject, I take that and realize that like I can gain knowledge from any situation. So whenever I go to like a new program or internship or even a class, I try to connect to someone there, whether it's an expert, whether it's a peer, or professor or something,
Right,
to learn from them. And so that's something that I would say, like words of wisdom is just like realize that like you have strengths and weaknesses. You don't have to be great at everything because it's basically impossible. But what you can do is take your weaknesses and try to build off of them, whether it's from learning from someone else or making mistakes and learning along the way. Because by doing that, you kind of not only do you gain that knowledge, but you also gain kind of like willpower and then also confidence in yourself and confidence to ask questions and put yourself in uncomfortable situations. Because that's the only way that you're going to adapt and grow both like as a professional and as a person.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice, especially for like this series, because a lot of women, over men at least, have the tendency to have like this perfectionism. If I'm perfect at this thing, then I can excel at it. But I think your like those words of wisdom, like if you don't know something, you can learn it, is super important. Like that growth mindset is a really key factor to like excelling in any field. So you talked a lot about being like a female in STEM, and luckily you've had like a supportive community throughout your years. Are there any struggles you faced because of being a female in STEM? If you have, do you have like what have you learned from your struggles, or how did you overcome them?
I'd say like I haven't had a ton, but I'd stem back to like the microaggressions where it's like people will sometimes inadvertently, like not consciously, they will just kind of pass over you or not refer to you as much because you are a woman in STEM or because you're a minority in STEM. Something that I've learned is that you don't really have to prove anything to them. You have to prove stuff to yourself. The best situation you can put yourself in is putting yourself in a situation where you can educate them about what they're doing wrong, and how they can improve. And then if they don't respond to that, just saying like, okay, you're not worth my time and I'm just not going to interact with you. And like, obviously that's simplifying the problem. There's a lot of times where you can't really leave that kind of situation. And that's really unfortunate. But in the majority of circumstances that I've had, I've been lucky enough to be able to say like, okay, you're being disrespectful or you're not like taking me seriously and you're not responding to the fact that I'm telling you that you're doing these things. I'm just not going to react with you or interact with you anymore, because it's not worth it.
I know this is a huge struggle for like especially like women in tech getting like talked over or like just looked over, and sometimes a lot of people don't realize it might just be an implicit bias. So what you pointed out about like calling it out when you see it is really important, because at the end of the day, all we can do is help people learn. The biases are going to stay until, they're implicit. We can't change them. But if you start calling stuff out when you see something's wrong, that can like open up a conversation, start change. So I think that's super important. What would you say is the most interesting thing about you that we wouldn't learn from your resume alone?
Like there are aspects of my life that are not related to engineering at all. So like I love writing, like I run a blog, like I love organizing events because like I'm the president of my sorority, and like there's things that I do that aren't traditional engineering that you wouldn't see me or see my resume and say like, okay, she enjoys doing that.
Yeah, no, you say it's not interesting, but it is, because I notice a pattern when I'm talking to all these, like interviewing all these girls. They tell me that there's so many things they're passionate about outside of engineering that's not reflected in their resume. Their personality is not reflected. Like, I was talking to somebody like a couple hours ago, and she was like, yeah, I'm really passionate about music. And that's not reflected anywhere in my resume, because when you go for an interview, you're just looking for technical skills until you talk like a recruiter in person or whatever. When little girls or even little boys see that stereotype of like a coder being like a white male who's antisocial and just codes all day in a dark room in a hoodie, like that's not what tech is. So I feel like changing that perspective and like bringing more females into tech and educating people that that's not what tech is really important. What is your advice for a girl looking to start in the various fields you're in, either like ECE or computer science in general?
I'd say be comfortable with failure, for sure, because I think the thing about tech is that there's so many people involved. There's so many different technologies you can learn. There's so much knowledge you can gain. And so it's kind of overwhelming. And then you add like not compiling code correctly or like not making the correct looking website or things, something like that, like not meeting your expectations. It kind of just is very overwhelming in general. The interesting thing about tech is that you learn the most when you fail because you learn what the pain points of that program are. Like by making those mistakes, you kind of understand the boundaries of what the tech can do. It's
Mm-hmm.
hard to do. It's hard to say like, okay, I'm fine if this doesn't work because like it could be 3 in the morning and you're like, I really need this to work because I need to submit it in like a couple hours. And so like, it might not be easy to be comfortable with failure, but like in the long run, it's just good to understand that like you're not going to know everything. In the long run, that process of finding information, making mistakes, learning from them, and like getting to a finished product, like will ultimately make you a better engineer. Because the way that I think about engineering is like you are learning the knowledge that's specific to like mechanical engineering, chemical engineering, electrical engineering, stuff like that. Like you're learning that specific knowledge, But the main skill that you learn by being an engineer is how to adapt and how to think creatively. And you don't do that unless you make mistakes and unless you like mess up really badly.
Wow, that's amazing what you said about like engineering being just another way to adapt and like learn that way, because that's totally true. Like I know in coding, like you can't go anywhere without failure, whether that be like your code failing or then your code doing the wrong thing. Like you're going to fail over and over again until you like complete your final, project. So yeah, it was really great talking to you and hearing all your advice. Thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for putting it in the Slack.
Yeah, so for anybody watching out there, you can like, comment, subscribe, because we'll be posting videos on this YouTube channel every Friday, and you can hear more stories from girls everywhere in various STEM, art, math, and writing fields. So thank you again for joining us.